This is Steve with Rocky Mountain ATV MC, and today I'm going to show you how to install our Tusk Mohawk A-Arms on a Polaris XP 1000. The stock A-Arms on a Polaris RZR XP 1000 are prone to damage and failure under extreme use. So we've come up with our Tusk Mohawk Extreme Duty High Clearance suspension components that have a much greater overall design to give you more clearance where you need it most. Plus they're much stronger than the stock OEM A-Arms, and they come in a bunch of different colors. The extra strength and clearance is valuable, especially when you're going through deep ruts, trying to clear large rocks and obstacles. So today I'm going to show you how to install these on this 2019 Polaris RZR XP 1000. Now the procedures that I'm going to show you will be very similar on your 2014 newer XP 2 and 4-seater 1000s and turbo models, but you need to check with your service manual to be sure. To do this job, you'll need some basic hand tools, a torque wrench, drill, a rivet gun, snap ring pliers, rags, gloves, and safety glasses, and a copy of your OEM service manual for more information, proper procedures, and specs. You will also need your Tusk Mohawk Extreme Duty High Clearance A-Arm kit, which can come with or without all the hardware needed to do the install. The first thing we need to do is raise our machine so that we can remove our suspension components. Now make sure when you do this that you do it in a safe manner, so that you don't cause injury to yourself or damage to the machine. To remove the stock A-Arms, we first need to go ahead and remove the front wheel. Now that we've got our A-Arms exposed, we're going to start by replacing the upper one first. Now keep in mind that if you do just replace the upper one, it will work with the stock lower one from Polaris, and vice versa if you're going to do it the other way around. Now we suggest doing them as a set as they work much better that way. Now, if you are just replacing the lower, go ahead and fast forward through the video for the install on just the lower. Let's grab a jack stand or a stand and place it beneath the lower A-Arms cross member. Anytime you remove a nylon lock nut, the Polaris manual recommends that you replace it with a new one. Let's grab the large zip tie in the kit, as we're going to use that to secure the shock up to the frame and to hold it out of the way. But we need to remove the lower shock bolt first. Now let's grab our drill and our 3/16 drill bit, and we need to remove the rivets that are holding the plastic brake clamps to the upper A-arm. If the rivet begins to spin on you, you can take a flat blade screwdriver and place it underneath the plastic and pry up on it. This will bind up the rivet and help you drill out the rest of it. If your machine is equipped with a sway bar, go ahead and remove the upper bolt that holds the sway bar link to the upper A-arm. Next, we can remove the bolt securing the upper ball joint to the steering knuckle. Take a rubber mallet and use it to tap on the ball joint while you're pulling up on it to remove it from the knuckle. Now we can remove the two bolts holding the upper A-arm to the frame. Now some machines may have a plastic cover on the front you need to remove to gain access to the upper A-arm bolt. Ours does, so we're going to go ahead and remove the front cover to remove that bolt. And now we can just slide out the A-arm. You can get our kits with or without hardware. Now if you've got our kit and it does not come with the hardware, then you will need to remove the old hardware from the stock A-arm. Now I'm going to show you how to do that, and then I'm also going to show you how to install our new hardware into our new A-arm, as it's the same procedure as installing the old hardware in the new A-arm. The first thing we need to do is remove the ball joint. To do that, we need to use our snap ring pliers and remove the snap ring. Grab a rubber mallet and you can use that to tap out the ball joint. Now we need to remove the pivoting caps and sleeves inside the A-arm. Go ahead and grab a screwdriver and use that to pry out the pivoting caps. Grab a pick and we need to remove the circlip that's on the narrow end of the pivoting part of the A-arm. Using a hammer and a punch, we can go ahead and tap out the bushing. Just make sure you tap it from the inside of the A-arm to the outside. Now we'll just repeat the same process on the other side. You may need to support it on something to get it off the table so that you can tap it out. On the wide pivoting side, you can tap out the bushings from both ends. Now I've got the stock OEM Polaris hardware here next to the Mohawk hardware. Now we use stainless steel material, which is quite a bit better and has better wear characteristics, but they are the same and they are interchangeable. We're going to go ahead and install our new hardware into our new Mohawk A-arm. The first thing we need to do is install our ball joint. Now, because this is the upper A-arm, we need to make sure that the ball joint is in the right direction. Now, if you didn't make note of that when you were disassembling it, the ball joint will face down on this one. Now, both of these surfaces are both CNC machined, so it should go together fairly easy. You might need to use a rubber mallet to get it in there, but just don't mar up the top of the ball joint, as that would ruin it. Then we'll just install the snap ring once we get it in. When doing this, make sure that the snap ring sits all the way into the groove. Now let's install our pivoting bushings, our pivoting caps and sleeve into the large side of our A-arm. Now we're going to use our ball joint shaft bolt that we removed when we took off the A-arm, and it's just the right length, and we'll use that as a tool to install our bushings into the housing along with the caps. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the bushings and stick them on either side of the A-arm and use a vise to press those in, and then we'll simply put the cap on the bolt and use the bolt itself to push the pivoting bushings the rest of the way into the A-arm. Then we can install the sleeve and do the same thing on the other side. First, we need to put a little bit of grease on inside the housing. Now, if you've got a pair of soft jaws, I would suggest using them. We'll put a little grease on the O-rings on the pivoting caps as well. Now, in the pivoting caps, there's a chamfered spot, and that needs to go on the outside of the housing itself when you install it. When you do this, put the sleeve on first, and then go ahead and slide it into the pivoting bushing, and then we're going to use the vise and we'll just clamp it all together. Now on the small end side, you can only install the bushing from the outside in. So we're going to use the vise to do that, and then we'll use a cap to push it the rest of the way in. But after you get the pivoting bushing all the way in, you need to put the circlip in, and then you can put the pivoting caps back in. Now remember, we need to grease all of our parts the same way that we greased the first one that we installed. Make sure that the circlip is seated correctly in its groove. And that finishes up installing all the hardware on the upper A-arm. Now let's install the upper A-arm to the pivoting bolts on the frame. Now it may take a little extra effort, especially if you've wrecked it and that's why you're replacing your A-arms. Make sure to come from the back side so that the brake line goes over top of your A-arm. Now we'll just install the nuts and torque them to 42 foot-pounds. Now let's lower the ball joint down into the steering knuckle. Now you can see this groove that's cut out of the ball joint. That needs to go down and line up with the bolt that you insert through the knuckle, and we'll torque that to 42 foot-pounds. Now you might need to lift up on the steering knuckle to help wiggle the ball joint in. Now if your machine does have a sway bar, let's go ahead and install that bolt and the lower shock bolt and torque both of them to 42 foot-pounds. Now that we've got those torqued, take the existing plastic brake line clamps that we removed from the stock A-arm. Now there's kind of two different styles. We need to reuse one, and that's the one that the clamp part is on the outside of it and not in the center. Now what we need to do is we need to use this, and we need to clamp the brake line about a ½ inch below the gusset. So what we want to do is put the brake line right inside of the gusset, go ahead and clamp our clamp on, and then come down about a ½ inch from the gusset, and then we need to mark and drill a hole there and use our rivet to rivet that. Now if your machine has one of these, most machines don't, but the newer models now have these. What you can do the rubber part is glued to the brake line. If you take a flat blade screwdriver and you just work it underneath the rubber a little bit, it will break free, and then you can slide it up and down the brake line. Now we're going to go ahead and slide this down, and we are going to mount it just on the outside of this outer weld right here. We'll mark a hole and drill it out and use our other rivet to go ahead and secure that. Now when you do this, you need to make sure that there's enough free play in your brake line. So if you pull it down and then mount everything, it still will slide in both of them, but you just want to make sure that you have enough free play down here. And after we get both of the rivets mounted, we'll go ahead and cycle the wheels back and forth to make sure that we're not pulling on the brake line. Now that I've got my clamp positioned where I want it, I'm going to use a punch and a hammer and go ahead and mark that and then drill it out. I'm going to do the same thing on the lower one as well. Now let's grab our rivet gun and go ahead and rivet those on. Now if you don't have a pneumatic rivet gun, a manual one will work just as well. Now let's cycle the wheel back and forth so that we can make sure that we have enough free play. Now that we've got those riveted, we have enough free play, let's go ahead and take the other supplied zip tie and we're going to zip tie the brake line to the upper gusset of our A-arm. And that's just so that the brake line won't slide back and forth through the plastic clamp. Now the last thing we need to do is just remove the stand from the lower A-arm. Now at this point, we've done the complete install of the upper A-arm, and you would just need to reinstall your wheel and torque it to your wheel's specification at this point. Now for the guys that are doing just the lower A-arm, we're going to go ahead and start that disassembly. We're going to start by removing the CV boot guard and then the lower ball joint bolt. Let's take a rubber mallet and we're going to go ahead and pull down on the lower A-arm and tap the A-arm right next to the ball joint. Now hopefully it will come all the way out. Sometimes they're stubborn, and if it doesn't want to come out, the next step you could do is to take out the upper A-arm bolts that hold the A-arm to the frame, and that'll give you more free play, and then you should be able to get it out at that point. The first thing we need to do is remove the ball joint. To do that, we need to use our snap ring pliers and remove the snap ring. Grab a rubber mallet and you can use that to tap out the ball joint. Now we need to remove the pivoting caps and sleeves inside the A-arm. Go ahead and grab a screwdriver and use that to pry out the pivoting caps. You may need to support it on something to get it off the table so that you can tap it out. Now we need to install the hardware into the lower A-arm. Whether you're using the hardware that you just removed or if you're using the new hardware, it all installs the same. First, let's install the ball joint. Now it's directional. You need to make sure that it's facing the right direction, and because this is the lower A-arm, the ball joint will be facing up. Now these are both CNC parts, so they should go together pretty easily, but you may need to use a rubber mallet to tap it in. Then you'll just need to install the snap ring and make sure that it sits in the groove all the way. Now to install our pivoting bushings into the A-arm housing, we'll do it a lot the same way that we did the upper A-arm. We'll put a little grease inside both of them. We'll use our vise to press in our pivoting bushings first. Then we will use the ball joint shaft bolt that we had removed when we disassembled our A-arms, and we will use that as a tool and slide on our pivoting cap to press our pivoting bushings in all of the way. Put grease on the O-rings on the pivoting caps. Also, the pivoting caps have a chamfer on one side of them, and that needs to face the outside when you install it. Now when you put it in the vise, make sure to put the sleeve on after you put the pivoting cap on the bolt. Now we'll just repeat the same process for the other side. With any mass-produced machine, there's variances, especially in the chassis and other components on a machine. Now, knowing this, sometimes you might have to manipulate something to get things to fit right. And then as time gets put on the machine, that can make it even worse. And that's okay. Just know that some of the components you may need to use a rubber mallet or a pry bar to line things up. The amount of stress that these components have to handle is a lot, especially if you're doing some extreme riding. So that's one of the reasons why you should get these stronger A-arms for sure. But just know that if you have to use a pry bar or a hammer to get bolts in and that sorts, that's okay. Just be careful when you do it. Now that we have the upper pivot bolts installed along with the lower ball joint bolt, let's go ahead and torque all three of those to 42 foot-pounds. Now at this point, all we need to do is reinstall the wheel and torque the wheel to the wheel manufacturer's torque specs. Now all these procedures that I just showed you for the upper or lower A-arms, we would just need to duplicate those and do those on the other side to finish out the install altogether. So let's go ahead and put this wheel on. And that's it. That's all there is to installing your Tusk Mohawk Extreme Duty High Clearance A-Arms. Now keep in mind, we have a number of other install videos for our Tusk Heavy Duty suspension components that you should check out. Now for parts like these and many others, come check us out at RockyMountainATVMC.com. And remember, all orders over $75 ship for free. And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is Steve. We'll catch you next time.